Hey everyone. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way YouTube will keep showing you more stories just like this one. Alright, let's get started. 9 months ago, I was wrapping up my 3rd year working as a paramedic in Columbus, Ohio. By then, I thought I had gotten used to the rhythm of the job. Night shifts full of drunks, domestic disputes, occasional overdoses. My partner at the time was Mark Hanley, a veteran EMT with almost 2 decades under his belt. We worked the overnight rotation, which meant we often handled the stranger calls that didn't seem to fit neatly into categories. It was the 2nd week of October, a Wednesday night just after 2 a.m., when dispatch called in a cardiac arrest at 1524 Northridge Drive. Standard lights and sirens, Mark driving while I checked our jump bag. At that hour, most calls blur together, but I remember thinking the address rang a bell, even though I couldn't place why. When we pulled onto Northridge Drive, the place looked different from what I expected. The house sat at the very end of a cul-de-sac, paint faded to a dull gray, weeds swallowing what had once been a yard. No lights on inside, no car in the driveway, no porch light to guide us. Normally, someone meets you at the door in a panic, waving frantically, but here it was silent. Mark carried the jump bag, and I wheeled the gurney up the cracked walkway. I pounded on the door hard enough to wake the block, shouting EMS. Nothing. The door was locked. Mark shone his flashlight through a front window, and all we saw was a dust-covered living room. Furniture draped with sheets, floor layered with grime. We circled the house, checking windows, the side yard, and the back. Everything was overgrown, the backyard knee-high in weeds. A rusted swing set leaned against the fence, one swing dangling on a single chain. It was obvious no one had been living there for a long time. Dispatch radioed again, asking for an update. Mark told them we couldn't access the patient. The dispatcher, her name was Kelly, sounded uneasy. She said she had the caller still on the line minutes earlier, an elderly man, 76, reporting chest pain and shortness of breath. He had given the address clearly, twice. His voice wasn't muffled or distorted. When asked to confirm, he said, "I live alone. Please hurry. I can't breathe." But the house was clearly abandoned. A neighbor's light flicked on. An older woman in a robe came onto her porch, staring at us. She said nobody had lived in that house since the Mitchell family left for Florida almost 4 years ago. The property had been bank-owned for a while, on and off the market. She looked confused when we explained that dispatch had a caller from inside. Shaking her head, she went back inside, muttering about prank calls. Mark and I searched another 10 minutes. Then got diverted to a motorcycle crash across town. We wrote up the call as unable to locate patient. At the time, I figured maybe someone was spoofing numbers, some kind of trick. 2 nights later, it happened again. This time, it was 3:30 a.m. Kelly's voice on the radio carried that same hesitation. Same address, same description. Elderly male caller, difficulty breathing, pain radiating into his arm, history of heart disease. Mark and I just stared at each other. We requested police backup before heading out. Officers arrived right after us, and together we did the same routine, knocking, circling the property, checking every door and window. Nothing had changed. The house was dark, dust still thick on every visible surface, no sign of anyone inside. The officers managed to reach the property management company listed on record. They confirmed the home was vacant, power and water shut off years earlier. Phone service disconnected. Yet Kelly later played us the recording of the call. The voice was shaky but clear, describing classic myocardial infarction symptoms. Chest pressure like a weight, pain down the left arm, sweating, and dizziness. He gave his name as Walter Green. He even told dispatch he was 76 years old and lived alone at 1524 Northridge Drive. The line went dead 3 minutes later. From that point, the calls kept coming. Not every night, but often. Sometimes twice a week, sometimes nothing for days, and then 3 calls in a row, always between 2 and 5 a.m., always the same male voice. Sometimes the symptoms varied, chest pain, shortness of breath, dizziness, but the details never changed. Same name, same age, same address, always alone. Mark started documenting everything. He carried a notebook, wrote down exact times and exact words we heard from dispatch. Dispatchers rotated, but Kelly stayed on several of those nights, and she told me later she hated answering when that number popped up on her screen. The caller ID showed a disconnected landline associated with that house. The phone company was called in after the fifth incident. They sent technicians to inspect. Their report said the line was physically disconnected at the pole, no service to the address, no dial tone from inside the house. There was no way a call should have gone through. They checked for illegal connections or rerouted circuits. Nothing. Yet the recordings kept piling up in dispatch logs. Mark became obsessed. He spent hours digging through county records. He found the name Walter Green tied to the property back in 2015. At the time, Walter was a widower who had lived alone after his wife passed. The death record showed he'd died of a massive heart attack in that house in August 2015, 7 years earlier. The coroner's notes said he was discovered 3 days later by a neighbor after newspapers piled up on the porch. He'd been found near the hallway phone, receiver off the hook. No 911 call was ever logged that night. It explained everything. Walter had tried to call but never got through. The calls we'd been getting weren't new. They were delayed by 7 years. The activity went on for months. By December, nearly a dozen calls were logged, all variations of Walter's original distress. Other crews refused to respond. Mark and I kept drawing the assignments because by then we were documenting carefully. Police even set up surveillance for 1 week, parked across the street. An officer swore nobody entered or left. No lights came on. Yet dispatch still received another call at 3:14 a.m. from Walter Green, describing a heavy pressure like an elephant on my chest. It was impossible to ignore. Then, in early August, exactly 7 years after Walter's recorded date of death, the calls stopped. The final one came in at 2:47 a.m. Kelly was on dispatch again. She told us later that the voice sounded the same but calmer, almost relieved. He simply said, "Thank you for coming," and the line disconnected. We still responded, of course. The protocol required it. But the house was the same, dark, abandoned, untouched. That was the last call. Weeks later, the property sold. A young couple bought it, gutted the place, and remodeled everything. Painted the siding blue, planted a new lawn, and set up a modern doorbell camera. By the holidays, kids' toys littered the yard, and lights glowed warmly in the windows. They never knew about the calls. I never told them. Mark transferred to the day shift not long after. He said he needed a change, but I knew it was more than that. Kelly still works dispatch. She and I never talk about it, but I notice sometimes when she reads a cardiac call in the early hours, she hesitates before giving the address, double-checking. The official report lists it as technical anomaly, possible spoofed calls. Case closed. But I know what I heard. I've handled enough real cardiac emergencies to know genuine pain in someone's voice. Walter Green never got through to 911 the night he died. For 7 years, those calls finally went through. And maybe all that mattered was that someone answered, even if it was too late. Back when I worked nights as a city paramedic, my life was a loop of 12-hour shifts, burnt coffee, and the steady hum of the radio. I rented a 1-bedroom in a converted warehouse on the edge of downtown Cleveland, and mostly saw my neighbors in the elevator or when our doors happened to open at the same time. If I wasn't at the station, I was grabbing takeout or trying to get a few hours of sleep with the scanner turned low. The city never really went quiet, not even at 3 in the morning. That year, I was paired with Tasha Green. She had a dry way of talking that made people calm down, even when things were going badly, and I don't think I ever saw her run unless she absolutely had to. We'd handled just about everything together. Overdoses behind the bus station, pile-ups on the highway, a warehouse evacuation where the sprinklers wouldn't shut off, and we were soaked through our uniforms by the end. We worked well as a team. Most calls blended together after a while. One didn't. The first time we were sent to that office tower on Euclid Avenue, dispatch coded it as a possible cardiac arrest inside an elevator. Late afternoon, weekday. The sidewalks were crowded with people heading for the train. Food trucks were closing up, and the security guard who met us in the marble lobby looked like he'd jogged a mile to reach the door. He didn't bother with small talk. He pointed at the bank of elevators and said a woman had called 911, saying her coworker had collapsed in a car between the 11th and 12th floors. We rolled the cot straight to the bank. The guard used a key to get one of the doors open. The cab was empty. No shoes, no bag, no jacket on the rail, just bright fluorescent light on brushed steel. I tapped the corners with my flashlight out of habit, checked the floor, and checked the ceiling panel. Nothing. We looked at each other and did what we always do when a call turns up, nothing. Made sure nobody else in the building had pressed an emergency button and left. Security showed us the other cars, all normal. We wrote it up as unable to locate and moved on. 6 days later, we were back. Dispatch this time said 2 people had fainted inside the elevator. Same spot between the same floors. We moved with more urgency, already knowing the route through the lobby. When the door slid open, the cab was clean and vacant, and the only smell was whatever sanitizer the janitorial crew used on the stainless. No scuff marks that didn't belong, no signs anyone had slid down a wall or been dragged out. Tasha rubbed her knuckles over her eyes and said, maybe someone had figured out how to ping the emergency line. I didn't argue, but I noticed she kept glancing at the ceiling corners like she expected something to drop. The 3rd time, dispatch said an older male was clutching his chest. They emphasized that the caller's coworker was with him in the car when it stalled. We headed in fast. Security had already pried the doors apart with the emergency tool. The car was vacant again. The guard on duty swore he'd just watched a man slumped on the floor on the monitor. Then the feed fuzzed and cleared to an empty cab. He replayed it for us in the office. A pause, a smear of gray across the pixels, and then nothing. He kept apologizing like it was his fault we'd come up for no reason. After that, I started asking questions. The maintenance shop sat behind a locked metal door near the loading dock. We caught one of the techs as he walked in, a heavy-set guy with red hair and grease on his sleeves, whose badge said Pritchard, G. He listened to my elevator story without interrupting, and then said flatly, "Car D's been off service for years. No power, no phone, dead car." He didn't say it like a legend. He said it like an item from a work order. I asked him how that could be when dispatch kept getting calls. He shook his head and led us down a back stair to a cramped equipment room. He popped an electrical cabinet and shone a flashlight on neatly capped lines. "This feed's cut. Controller's gone. Car sits parked in the hoistway with a brace on it." He crossed to a small gray box and opened it. Bare screws where a cable once connected. Emergency phones physically disconnected. We left the other cars alive, but D is a dummy. He must have seen the look on my face, because he added, almost reluctantly, "There was an incident. Late 90s. Guy had a myocardial infarction. The car stalled, and nobody realized it for too long. After that, ownership locked the car down. Legal and insurance. We don't send anyone in unless we have to." It didn't sit right. Dispatch logs showed genuine 911 traffic flagging that elevator, timestamps, caller statements, descriptions. If the emergency line was dead, where were those calls coming from? We didn't have long to think about it. A few nights later, we were sent again. Same address, same elevator. We rode up in one of the active cars with the cot folded and the basic bag at my feet. Neither of us spoke. The cables whined, and the car bounced the way old elevators do near stops. When the doors opened at 12, the hall fluorescence flickered once like a short pulse. Security waited by the sealed car, pointing without saying anything. We stood there, all 3 of us, listening, faint at first, then clear enough that I felt it in my throat. A congested cough from behind the steel, followed by a soft hit like a body sliding down a wall. Tasha yelled through the gap that help was outside. Her voice echoed into the shaft. The guard radioed the control room, and whoever was in there said the stalled car showed a person inside on the feed. They sounded rattled. Pritchard arrived with a tool bag in less than a minute. He didn't make any jokes. He used a crank, a key, and a pry bar, and the doors eased open on dead air and an empty box. 4 panels, scuffed metal floor, handrail, nothing else. Somebody had scrubbed the car sometime in the last year. The corners were free of grime. The only thing out of place was a faint metallic smell that made me think of an old penny held too long in a warm hand. Nobody admitted smelling it, but I watched the guard swallow hard. I can do this job for a long time without getting spooked. That night, my chest felt tight the rest of the shift. Word got around at the station fast. People joked that we'd adopted a pet elevator. Our dispatcher, Fiona, on nights tagged the address so those calls would route to us. At first, I thought she was trying to be efficient. Then I realized nobody else wanted to deal with it. Within a week, we were back again. Possible syncope, installed elevator. Between 11 and 12. Same script, same ritual, the guard walking us over, the quiet, the key in my hand. Only this time, the building manager was in the lobby when we arrived. Her name was Donna Langley, and she had the look of someone who had just come from a boardroom where people were yelling. She told us not to go up. She said the cost of any damage would be significant, and that there was no chance the call was genuine. Tasha asked whether the false calls were hurting her reputation that badly. Langley didn't answer. She followed us into the car anyway, hands clasped so tight her knuckles blanched. On 11, the sealed doors looked the same as always. We stood there for several seconds, not speaking, and then heard it plainly. A soft click of a receiver lifting off a cradle, followed by a single wheeze. It wasn't loud. It was the sort of sound you get when you put your ear to a wall and someone coughs in the next room. Langley went gray. "Use your key," Tasha said to the guard. He shook his head, so she looked at me. Langley fumbled in her jacket and pulled out an old brass key with a stamped code on it. She said it was the master that fit Car D and that it hadn't been turned in years. My thumb slipped once before I got it into the slot. The lock turned with a dry scrape. The doors parted a few inches, then slowly to the stops. The cab beyond was dark. We swept our lights together. For a second that lasted just long enough to register detail. I saw a man in a blue blazer, leaning back against the rear wall, eyes open and unfocused, one hand pressed high on his sternum. His tie was loosened, shirt collar open, hair flattened on one side as if he'd been lying down earlier. His gaze found the light and fixed on me like he recognized my face. Tasha said, "Sir," and stepped forward. I blinked, and there was nothing there but empty steel and our flashlights bouncing off it. The guard swore. Langley threw a hand against her mouth. Tasha looked at me with an expression I've only ever seen when a scene goes from routine to dangerous. We shut the doors. The hallway stayed quiet. No one suggested opening them again. Administration sealed the elevator bank 2 days later with screwed-in plates and posted a notice about modernization work. We didn't get another elevator call from that building after that. Not to the sealed car, not to the active ones. For a few weeks my phone buzzed with coworker asking if we'd heard anything new. Then everyone acted like it had been a weird rumor that faded. I still had questions. I reached out to a friend in facilities at a different property downtown and asked what happens to decommissioned elevator cars. He said most owners leave them parked, power cut, so they don't incur the cost of removing the cab. He also said emergency lines in sealed cars get pulled or capped because of the code. I didn't tell him why I was asking. I'd already seen the panel with my own eyes. A month later, out of work curiosity, or stubbornness, I dropped by the tower on a day off. The lobby was quiet. One of the regular guards, a guy named Amir, who liked to trade football scores with us, said they were renovating some floors and had shut down parts of the bank again. He didn't mention the sealed car. I didn't either. I walked back out into the heat and told myself to let it go. I didn't. I started looking up property records and older news pieces. It didn't take long. In 1998, a mid-level accountant named Peter Calloway collapsed in an elevator at that building during the evening rush. The car stalled between floors, and nobody noticed for a long time because 3 other cars were still moving, and people took the stairs when they got frustrated. By the time maintenance pried the doors, he was gone. The article said he was 49. It didn't mention the car number. It did mention that ownership paid a settlement and conducted extensive modernization. The article had a small photo of the lobby with a banner advertising a tenant appreciation week. The banner was blue. I didn't bring any of this to Tasha. She's good at compartmentalizing, and I could tell she wanted the matter behind us. We had enough real tragedies to handle that week without adding an old one we couldn't affect. We took 3 overdoses in 2 nights. We transported a stroke to the nearest comprehensive center, and the patient made it. We loaded a kid with a femur fracture and kept his mom calm the whole ride. We slept between calls. I tried not to think about sealed steel. Then, on a random Tuesday before dawn, our radio pinged with a familiar address. The code said fainting. The display tagged the location as the lobby, not a car. We were 5 minutes out. Tasha tapped the map. "If it says lobby," she said, "we're not going anywhere near that door." I didn't argue. When we rolled in, a custodian sat on a bench holding a damp mop and looking embarrassed. He'd felt lightheaded. He was fine by the time we got there. We checked vitals, offered transport, but he declined. Routine. We were packing up when I noticed an older phone mounted behind the security desk, one of those beige wall units with a long coiled cord. It had a sticker under it with a set of direct line codes for building services. One line was labeled Car D phone, disabled. I must have been staring longer than I realized because Amir said, "That one hasn't worked since before I got hired." He added that sometimes, late at night, the indicator for that line lit up on his console for no reason and then went dark again. I asked him if he logged those. He shook his head. We unplug the whole block once a month and plug it back in. The light stops for a while. We left it there. The calls didn't return. Langley kept the plates up for months, and then new stainless arrived, and the bank looked normal again. 4 active cars with fresh numbers and a framed notice about a safety upgrade. Car D's plate looked the same as the others if you weren't looking for differences. If you were, you would have noticed the tiny seam where the screws had been. I've been doing this long enough to know people will make a story out of anything that feels unresolved. I also know certain facts. An emergency phone with its cable removed cannot dial 911. Our dispatch system logs source numbers tied to real circuits, and a dead car can't show a warm body on a camera and then clear to empty. Those are 3 separate systems, telecom, dispatch, and CCTV, lined up to tell us the same kind of lie, or the same kind of truth we didn't have language for. What stays with me isn't the paperwork conflict. It's the simple human details that felt out of place. The weak scrape of a receiver coming off a cradle when there shouldn't be one. The first cough of someone who doesn't realize he's not getting air. The way a tie lies crooked when a person loosens it with their offhand. Those are the pieces that replay when a call goes quiet and we're waiting for the next tone. I still pass that tower sometimes on the way to a transfer. If it's late and the sidewalk's empty, you can see your face doubled in the glass doors. The lobby's brighter now, and they installed a coffee bar. People talk in the seating area, and nobody looks at the elevator wall, because why would you? They're going to their floors. They're thinking about emails and deadlines. I watch the numbers climb and drop, and if I catch myself counting up toward 12, I stop. Tasha doesn't bring it up. If someone at the station makes a joke about haunted elevators, she changes the subject. I think she was there in that 3-second span when the light found a man where no man should have been, and she decided not to make space for it in her head. She's probably right. We carry enough. For my part, I keep a copy of the service bulletin Pritchard printed for me from their system the week after everything stopped. He did it without being asked, sliding it under a stack of incident reports in the facilities office while I waited for the elevator mechanic to sign a statement. The bulletin is dry, 2 pages of maintenance language and a tiny line at the bottom. KRD emergency circuit, removed from service, October 21st, 1999. On the back, in pencil, someone scribbled a note next to an old room number. Call away, late. Maybe that's a coincidence. Maybe I misread the handwriting. Maybe none of this happened the way I remember, and I just needed a pattern where there wasn't one. That's the safe explanation. The one that lets me keep riding elevators to cardiac floors without my shoulders tensing around the number 11. But sometimes I think about how a call travels. Someone lifts a handset, a signal runs through a wire or a cell tower, a circuit recognizes an emergency, a dispatcher hears a voice, and a unit gets sent. It's a simple chain when you strip it down. And if something jams the chain in one place for a long time, if a car stalls, if a life ends while everyone else keeps moving, maybe the signal keeps trying to complete itself until someone finally answers in the way it understands. The owners sealed the steel, and the calls stopped. That's the official end. We never wrote up seeing a man in a blazer inside a dead cab, because that doesn't go into any field on our report. We didn't talk to the newspaper. There was no reason to scare tenants or make our dispatcher's life harder. We moved on to the next overdose, the next panic attack, the next chest pain that was actually a pulled muscle. Still, when I walk past that building on a slow night, I look up at the glass that hides the elevator bank and find the section that used to lead to Car D. I can't help it. There's a reflex born from answering too many calls. You listen even when no one's speaking. On the worst nights, I imagine a hand reaching for a phone that isn't connected, a careful cough to get someone's attention, a polite, strained voice trying to say where he is and what hurts. I don't say I believe in ghosts. I say I've been given directions to places that shouldn't exist and shown up anyway. I say we opened a door that had been closed a long time and saw a person who needed help for the space of one breath and then wasn't there. I say after that the calls stopped, and that's what we all wanted. But when the lobby is empty and the coffee bar is closed and the guard leans back in his chair watching a muted basketball game, I think there might still be someone inside a car that no longer runs, practicing how to say his floor and his problem, hoping the line will catch. And I hope, wherever signals go when they can't find a circuit, he got through. I've been working as a paramedic in rural Kentucky for close to a decade, and over the years I thought I'd seen just about everything. Farming accidents, car crashes on back roads, overdoses in barns that nobody talks about, but nothing in my training or in my years of field work prepared me for what happened last spring. It was a Thursday evening in late April, just after 11 p.m., when dispatch called in a single vehicle accident on Route 74, near mile marker 19. That stretch of highway is infamous around our county because of the sharp downhill curve that sneaks up after 2 miles of flat, tree-lined road. I'd responded to more than a dozen accidents there in the past. Some were bad, some fatal, but from the very start of that call, something felt off. My partner Sam Riley and I were finishing a double shift at the station. Dispatch gave the victim's name, Melissa Harding, 29 years old. The operator's voice hesitated just slightly before repeating the name again. Slower this time, like she was making sure we understood it. Sam and I looked at each other. He raised an eyebrow, but neither of us said anything. When we arrived at the scene, the car was a crumpled mess. A silver Honda Accord was wrapped nearly sideways around a thick oak tree just past the guardrail. The front end was destroyed, the windshield shattered, and the driver's side door crushed almost flat. In cases like that, the driver rarely makes it. But as we rushed up with our equipment, I saw movement. The woman behind the wheel, Melissa Harding, was still conscious. Blood streamed from a deep gash across her forehead. Her left arm bent at an unnatural angle, but she was alive, barely. "Where's my purse?" she asked, her voice weak but strangely calm. Sam shot me a quick look. The impact alone should have killed her instantly. I've seen enough to know when physics doesn't make sense. We stabilized her neck, checked her vitals, and found something even stranger. Her blood pressure was low but not dangerously so. Her pulse was steady, her breathing controlled. For someone who just smashed into a tree at highway speed, it didn't add up. Her skin felt cold to the touch, almost clammy, despite the humid spring night. When I shone my penlight into her eyes, her pupils reacted normally, but there was a faint gray tint around the irises that unsettled me. Sam noticed it too. He muttered under his breath, "That's not right." It took us nearly 20 minutes to cut her free, with the jaws of life. During the entire process, she kept apologizing. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just need to get home." Her tone was almost robotic, like she was repeating memorized lines. We loaded her into the ambulance, and I rode in the back while Sam drove us to Meadowbrook General Hospital, about 15 minutes away. On the ride, she asked me 3 times, "What day is it?" "It's Thursday," I told her each time. She'd nod slowly and whisper, "Thursday, right, Thursday." At the hospital, the ER team took over quickly. Dr. Paul Nguyen, a physician I trusted, whisked her away to radiology for scans. Sam and I slumped into the break room with bad coffee, filling out paperwork. We talked about how unbelievably lucky she was. That's when Nurse Carla, the charge nurse, overheard us. "What's the patient's name again?" she asked. "Melissa Harding," I said. Her face went white. She set down her clipboard and whispered, "That's impossible." She pulled us into an empty exam room and locked the door. Then she told us that Melissa Harding had died on Monday night, just 4 days earlier, in a nearly identical car crash at that exact curve on Route 74. Same car, same oak tree, same cause of death. Carla pulled up the records on her tablet to prove it. There it was, Melissa Harding, age 29, declared dead at 11:42 p.m. on Monday, April 24th. The file included her address in Ashford County, the same social security number, and even a death certificate signed by Dr. Nguyen himself. Sam and I just stared at each other. We had literally just pulled her out of a wreck, alive and talking. Sam ran to admissions to double-check. The Melissa we'd brought in had given her full name, date of birth, and even had the same tattoo, a small outline of a sparrow, on her wrist. There was no mistake. I pulled up our dashcam footage on my phone to prove we weren't losing our minds. The video clearly showed us pulling Melissa from the wreck, carrying her to the stretcher, and loading her into the ambulance. Real flesh, real blood, not some illusion. About an hour later, Dr. Nguyen came back looking unsettled. "She's gone," he said. "What do you mean, gone?" Sam demanded. She walked out. She was in radiology for her CT scan. The tech stepped out for 30 seconds, and when he came back, she wasn't there. Hospital security footage showed her walking down the hallway in a gown, barefoot, heading for the exit. But half the cameras didn't pick her up at all. One showed the automatic doors opening and closing with nobody visible. Another showed her perfectly clear, striding like she wasn't injured. A security guard swore she walked past his desk and even nodded at him. But his partner, sitting right next to him, swore nobody was there. By the time anyone searched outside, she was gone. All they found was her folded hospital gown in the parking lot, lying neatly by the space where our ambulance had been. The next morning at 6 a.m., another call came through. Single car accident, Route 74, mile marker 19. My heart sank when dispatch said the victim's name, Melissa Harding. Sam and I drove there fast, but when we arrived, the road was empty. No car, no wreckage, no victim. Just the same scarred oak tree standing in silence. 5 minutes later, dispatch called back to say the report was an error, but Sam and I had both heard the name. That afternoon, unable to shake the feeling, I drove to the address listed in her file, a small house on Sycamore Street, about 10 miles away. A man in his 30s answered, eyes sunken, face tired. "I'm Ethan Harding," he said when I introduced myself. When I mentioned Melissa, his lips trembled. He invited me inside. "She died Monday," he said, voice breaking. "Car crash on Route 74. They brought her here, but she didn't make it. We buried her yesterday." He showed me the funeral program, the obituary in the Ashford Gazette, and even photos from the service. I felt sick, but Ethan told me something else. Since Monday night, I've been getting calls from her phone. Every night at 11:30, I answer and hear breathing. Once she whispered, "I'm almost home." But her phone was destroyed in the crash. The police gave it back in pieces. I didn't tell him what Sam and I had experienced. How could I? But as I left, Ethan grabbed my arm. She kept having nightmares before she died. Always about that curve. Always crashing. She even started taking another route. But that night, the detour forced her back onto Route 74. That night, another call came in at exactly 11 p.m. Same location, same victim. Dispatch's voice sounded mechanical, almost scripted. Sam didn't want to go. "Let someone else take it," he said. But we both knew nobody else would. We drove fast, and sure enough, there it was. A silver Honda Accord smashed against the oak. The windshield shattered in the same pattern as before. Melissa Harding sat inside, alive again, staring right at me this time. "You came back," she whispered. She said my name. She knew me. We repeated the process. Extraction, stabilization, transport. But this time, I noticed something horrifying. Blood trickled from her forehead, then reversed direction for a moment, sliding back into the wound before dripping again. At the hospital, I refused to let her out of my sight. I stood outside the CT room as she whispered, "Every night I take that road. Every night I crash. But maybe if someone remembers, maybe if someone sees me." Just before midnight, she grabbed my hand with startling strength. "I need to get home," she said. "Ethan's waiting." Then her vitals flatlined at exactly 12:03 a.m. Dr. Nguyen called the time of death. This time, her body stayed. Cold, lifeless. Autopsy temperature matched someone dead for several days. After that night, the phantom calls stopped. No more Melissa Harding. No more false dispatches from Route 74. The county finally installed new lights and warning signs at the curve the following week. The construction crew said the job went smoother than any other, like something had finally been cleared away. I visited Ethan one last time. Told him Melissa wanted him to know she was trying to get home. He broke down crying but thanked me. Said the calls to his phone had stopped too, right at 12:03 a.m. on Friday. The final voicemail said, "I made it." Ethan swore he could hear her voice in the static. I only heard noise. Sam and I both switched off Thursday night shifts. Our supervisor didn't ask questions. Official records only show Melissa Harding died once, Monday, April 24th. Everything else doesn't exist. The other crews who logged the phantom calls amended their reports to equipment malfunction. Easier than admitting the truth. Sometimes I still drive past that curve. No accidents since the lights went up. But every Thursday night around 11 p.m., I see fresh tire marks on the shoulder near the oak, like someone stopped there, trying to make the turn. I like to think Melissa finally made it home.